Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Friel, I'm going to start with you. Actually, I'm going to keep most of my questions on you. My questions are going to be about the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act and the Safeguarding Veterans Second Amendment Rights Act that Representative Crane is going to be bringing through. Would you agree with me that it's imperative that eligible veterans feel comfortable receiving health care from the VA?
I would.
Thank you very much. As taken directly from the VA's mission, the core values are integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence, known as I CARE. Okay, that's taken directly from your mission statement. Do you think referring to veterans who need a fiduciary as mentally incompetent fulfills this mission or makes veterans less likely to pursue care at the VA?
So one thing I'd like to clarify, Representative Rosendale, is that VHA does not report individuals to NICS. That is a VBA function.
So, Mr. Friel, I know the process. Okay. Stop using someone else as a scapegoat. What I'm trying to find out is, do you think that identifying veterans that request a fiduciary as mentally incompetent builds confidence in them coming to the VA and receiving health care there? When you identify them as mentally incompetent?
I do believe, because that mental incompetency decision is based
You do believe that makes them more inclined to come to VA? Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
I don't believe that it does, but if you believe that it does.
I do not believe that it sways them in any way, because the decision is based off of benefit, not off medical treatment.
I just think it's a very degrading terminology. That's what I think. And I think if we went around the table here and started talking to the veterans and said, do you feel comfortable with the Veterans Administration identifying you as mentally incompetent, that you would probably find that most of the veterans find that offensive as well. Does the terminology respect the contributions veterans have made to our country?
I believe, sir, that we could probably look at better language than mentally incompetent. But
so you would say that it does not recognize the contributions that veterans have made to our country?
I would say that's a bad comparison, sir, and that we are looking at making that decision based off of what the fiduciary program is and what.
All right, Mr. Friel, are you concerned that veterans might be less willing to seek care at the VA, knowing that it could result in them unfairly losing their Second Amendment rights?
I am not. As I said before, seeking care is not what gets you into the fiduciary program. It's actually applying for benefits that puts you into that program.
The National Academy of Sciences found that 35% of the veterans identify, and I quote, the potential of having their personal firearms taken away as an obstacle to use VA mental health services. So if the VA won't acknowledge, and you will sit here and not acknowledge this or try to change that belief, that only leads us to believe that the VA is either trying to reduce the delivery of mental health care, because we have evidence that shows that it does reduce the confidence that veterans have in going and seeking this care. And if you won't acknowledge that, and if you want to change that, then that leads us to believe that you're either trying to reduce the amount of health care that's being delivered by the VA, or you're making this an attempt to seize firearms from the veterans. VA's testimony stated that if the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act is signed into law, and this is even more troubling, the VA could not comply, because the VA states the Department of Justice, an executive branch agency, affirmed VA's interpretation of the Brady Act. So, is it the VA's position that the VA will not comply with an act of Congress based on another agency's interpretation of the law?
So the VA has always works to comply with all laws. We complied with the Brady Handgun Act when it was in effect. The law.
So again, is the VA's position, because based on the statement they could not comply with the Restoration Act, the Veterans Second Amendment Restoration Act, is it your position that you will not comply with an act of law passed by Congress?
Yes, sir. I guess based off of what you have in testimony, yes, sir.
That you would not comply?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm glad everybody hears that on the record, that the VA is going to refuse to comply with, regardless of what we actually pass here, including questions that Representative Self was just asking in view of the Chevron Act being passed. Mr. Chair, I have just a couple more questions, but I think that Mr. Friel has incriminated himself and the VA that they're
Mr.
not
Friel-
they're going to have complete disregard for what we're going to do anyway. So
Mr.
I
Friel,
would
you're
yield back.
very well aware of how you just answered the congressman's question, correct?
Sir, as I said, it's in our testimony that we would have trouble complying with that law. As I said,
Mr. Friel, you're very well aware of how you answered the congressman's question.
yes, sir.